Welcome to the Functional Skills English Level 2 training video. This video is part 2 of the Level 2 punctuation videos. So to learn more about commas, head over to part 1. Part 2 centres around the correct use of inverted commas, apostrophes and quotation marks. Today's video links to the assessment criteria. Punctuate writing correctly using a wide range of punctuation markers. For example, colons, commas, inverted commas, apostrophes and quotation marks. So as you can see, we're specifically focusing on inverted commas, apostrophes and quotation marks in this video. Let's look at each of these punctuation markers in a bit more detail. Let's start with apostrophes. Apostrophes are an important punctuation marker that can be used for different purposes. They can be used to show that something belongs to someone or something, in other words, to show possession. Apostrophes can also be used to show when words have been shortened and that there are letters missing, otherwise known as omission. There are also slightly different rules for the word its, which is something a lot of people tend to get caught out with. We'll come to those a little later on. As I mentioned before, apostrophes can be used to show belonging or possession. Let's look at some examples. When we talk about the van belonging to Susan, we can shorten this to Susan's van. You can see here that we must add an apostrophe and an S to Susan to show that the van belongs to her. This works for any name not ending in an S. For example, John's car or Ellie's lunch. The apostrophe is placed elsewhere when a name ends with S. So for example, the shop belonging to Mr. James becomes Mr. James's shop. The apostrophe goes after the S, but it's still pronounced James's. Now, let's see if you can add apostrophes into the correct places in these examples. The badge belonging to the officer, the desk belonging to Jess. You can pause the video now to give you some time to do this. Okay, let's see how you did. The badge belongs to the officer, therefore it becomes the officer apostrophe S badge. The desk belongs to Jess. Jess already has an S at the end of her name, so the apostrophe goes after the S. Jess apostrophe desk. When using apostrophes for possession, it's important to think about plurals, which just means more than one of something. Usually plurals end with an S, so the same rules apply as a name ending with S. For instance, in this example, the writers' desks were in perfect rows. There are multiple writers. The word is plural. Therefore, the apostrophe must go after the S. If a plural doesn't end with an S, you must add an apostrophe and an S, much like the previous example of Susan's van. For instance, the men's lockers were out of bounds. Men is plural, however, does not end with an S, and so this must be added with the apostrophe. Now let's see if you can add apostrophes into the correct places in these examples. The dog's leashes became tangled. The children's books were ruined by the rain. You can pause the video now to give you some time to do this. Okay, let's look at where the apostrophe should go. The dog's leashes became tangled. There are multiple dogs in this example, and the plural ends with an S. So because of this, we add an apostrophe, but no additional S is needed. Let's look at the next one. The children's books were ruined by the rain. The plural is children, but this does not end with an S. So this must be added along with the apostrophe. The other use for apostrophes is to shorten words and replacing letters, or omission. This is usually done to shorten language or make it more informal. So for instance, they are becomes their. The A is omitted and an apostrophe is in its place. Do not becomes don't. The O in not is omitted and an apostrophe is in its place. And finally, had not becomes hadn't. Again, the O in not is omitted and an apostrophe is in its place. In all of these cases, the formal language of they are, do not, had not becomes more informal with there, don't, hadn't, having been shortened to one word. Now let's see if you can add apostrophes into the correct places in these examples. They did not understand the guide. You can pause the video now to give you some time to do this. Okay, let's have a look at where the apostrophes should go. They didn't understand the guide. Here we're looking at the two words did and not. These can be shortened to didn't. And so they did not understand the guide becomes they didn't understand the guide, making the sentence more informal. Now, as I mentioned before at the start of this video, there are different rules for it's and its. The most important thing to remember is that it's with an apostrophe is a shortened, more informal version of it is or it has. So, for example, we should go inside because it's getting late is short for it is getting late. This is the only time you would use an apostrophe in the word it's. It's without an apostrophe is used to show possession. So, for example, the department shared its targets for the year. In this case, it doesn't need an apostrophe, as even though it's showing possession, it's an exception to the normal rules. Now let's look at inverted commas and quotation marks. Inverted commas use the same symbol as apostrophes, but they come in pairs, like this. Have you played Dark Side of the Moon? You can see that there are two inverted commas, or apostrophes here. These sandwich the title of the game being talked about. Inverted commas are usually used for titles of things, such as books, games, and films, etc., when they're being referenced in a text. You'll likely use inverted commas throughout your writing, but most likely in articles or reviews where you might be referencing a particular book, game, film, or television programme. Now let's move on to quotation marks. These are similar to inverted commas, however, they look like two apostrophes together, like this. I couldn't believe my eyes, she exclaimed. You can see that the quotation marks are either side of what the person is saying, showing that this is a direct quote or direct speech from someone. Again, you might use quotation marks or speech marks when writing newspaper articles, if you want to refer to something that someone has directly said. Now let's see if you can put all that you have learned into practice. Here's an extract from a company newsletter. However, the apostrophes, inverted commas, and quotation marks are missing. I'll read this aloud and then you can pause the video while you add in the correct punctuation. Highfield News visited its sister company to watch the launch of the new cafe named Highfield Coffee. The company's director, Mr. Joss, gave us all the details. I'm really excited for this new venture, he said. It's going to be great for the company's future. Mr. Joss's associates were all on hand to see that the company's launch went smoothly, cheering when he cut the ribbon. Now you can pause the video while you add the apostrophes, inverted commas, and quotation marks in the correct places. Okay, let's see how you did. So, Highfield News visited its sister company. We don't need an apostrophe here because it shows possession here. It's not short for it is or it has. To watch the launch of the new cafe named Highfield Coffee. Now, Highfield Coffee is the name of something, we're referring to it in this text, so we need to use inverted commas. The company's director, now here we have an apostrophe S because the director belongs to the company, so this is possession. Mr. Joss gave us all the details. I'm really excited for this new venture. So you can see here we've got quotation marks at the start of when somebody is saying something, he said. It's going to be great for the company's future. Now again, within these quotation marks, we start with it's. This is short for it is, so we need to use an apostrophe. And here we've got company's future. We've got an apostrophe S. That's because the future belongs to the company. And finally, Mr. Joss's associates. Mr. Joss here ends with an S. His associates belong to him in this sentence, so therefore we need an apostrophe after the S. We're all on hand to see that the company's launch went smoothly. Again, the launch belongs to the company, so we need an apostrophe S. Okay, let's recap everything we've covered in this video. You should now be confident in your knowledge that apostrophes are used for possession and omission. Inverted commas are used for titles of things or references to specific things. Quotation marks are used to indicate when somebody directly says something. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. For more information and guidance on using punctuation, you can watch part 1 on commas or part 3 on colons as part of this learning criteria. Thank you for watching.